All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Anissa Avon, and I am here with Candace McGlynn and Roger Rinker. And hello, Candace. Hello, Roger.
Hello.
Hello. Good to you, everyone.
So nice to have you guys. And thank you guys for joining us on the call today on our educational seminar. I am going to get us started. There we go. Let me share my screen. All right. You guys can see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, welcome everyone. This is Leading in a Crisis Virtual Summit, our actionable business and HR strategies for navigating crisis and change. And today we have Learning at the Speed of Change, how learning accelerates innovation, agility, and recovery, which clearly right now, all of us need all of that. So I'm super excited to get started. I know that Roger and Candace have a lot to cover. So I'm going to speed through our sponsors. I want to say thank you so much to the Whitmarsh Consulting Group, David Whitmarsh and his team of super talented marketing experts and multi-channel experts do email marketing and blogs and social media marketing, and they are HR IT consulting experts. I highly recommend reaching out to them for your marketing needs. I also want to say thank you to Insperity. HR that makes a difference. I reached out to Insperity and asked them if they would help sponsor our Leading in a Crisis Summit. And they said, where do I show up? What do you need? Which was kind of cool because there are other questions about when, who's going to be there, how many attendees, who are your guests? I didn't have any of those answers yet. So it was really cool that they trusted us enough to partner with us in this. I went back to them and I said, what would you be willing to provide free, given we're in the middle of a pandemic and an economic catastrophe, to our customers, to our attendees? And they thought about it and came back and said, well, how about a free HR financial analysis report and one-on-one debrief? And I asked a few more questions, found out that that was kind of a big deal. Our business performance advisor partner over there will spend anywhere from 3 to 10 hours looking over your HR budget, which right now we all know your HR budget is probably out the window. What was is not to continue to be. So if you would benefit from an expert supporting you in reevaluating your employee strategy, don't hesitate to take advantage of that. They know that not everyone is a good fit for what they do, and they're still willing to serve and support our attendees and clients and friends. So you can check that out at turnkeycoachingsolutions.net/HR report. Now, I want to say thank you also to our internal team of strategists who have put together a really pretty amazing data-driven crisis strategy and post-crisis strategic planning and alignment process. It helps teams go through the 27 challenges that all businesses are going to face and reevaluate from where you've been to where you are to where you want to be, and then create an actionable plan where you and your team can get aligned and drive for results together. So reach out if you are curious about that, or if you know your team needs to get with repositioning the business. So little about me. I'm the CEO of Turnkey Coaching and Development Solutions. We are an enterprise learning and development organization. We work with really phenomenal experts like Candace and Roger, fulfilling training and development and organizational development consulting and culture change and assessments and what have you. We have footprint in every major metropolitan area in the US and in key hubs globally. What I'm most proud of, though, is my team put together this Leading in a Crisis virtual summit with 40 plus speakers in a matter of days. We're going to keep going every Wednesday and Thursday through May. And we look forward to addressing whatever is on your mind. So reach out if you have a topic or a question about how to pivot your business or manage your workforce or support them in becoming more effective and successfully navigating this crazy time. So I am very thrilled that Candace McGlynn and Roger Rinker are here with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Candace and Roger, please tell us a little bit about you guys, yourselves, what makes you the expert on learning at the speed of change, and what we're going to learn today.
Great.
Thank you, Anissa, for having us today. We're excited to be here, I think maybe just very briefly a little bit about ourselves with regards to my experiences. I've spent 30 years in corporate HR as an HR leader for large global companies. And during that time, I was responsible not only for human resources, but for, the learning experience for employees as well. I like to think that I learned a lot during that time. And my current initiative through innovation is to really share some of those stories of the lessons that I've learned in those 30 years and help other organizations create an impactful e-learning environment. And with that, I will turn it over to my partner, Candace.
Yes. So hi, everyone. My name is Candace McGlenn, and I am also a business solutions consultant with Innovation. We're a one-stop shop for e-learning. And for the last 10 years, I've been working in talent development and doing all sorts of things from change management to helping organizations build not only the capacity of their workforce, but organizational capacity. So I'm really excited to be here today. We are talking about learning at the speed of change. And Anissa, I just want to thank you for having us here today. I don't think there is a better testament of what it means to learn at the speed of change than what Turnkey Solutions has been able to do with putting together this Leading in a Crisis Summit in, like you said, a matter of days with 40 experts. I can only imagine, what you all had to go through to get that done, but it's looked seamless from our end. And, just thank you for putting together resources, because this is an unprecedented time that, we're all learning from. And, with that being said, when we think about like globalization and technological advancements and how that has really increased the speed of change, I think for a while we've been talking about it. You read articles, you've read books, you've been to seminars that talks about change and how change is needed and innovation and all these buzzwords. And I think for a while we've been able to look at it as a nice to have. But now we realize that it's completely necessary to change. And there is a deep relationship between learning and change. And so that's where we're here to talk about today, just how organizations can prepare their workforce to respond to uncertainty and change through learning. And so we have a question before we get started. And that is just to ask, how has the speed of change impacted your organization today? What's happening in your world? How has it changed your organization? How are you responding to change in your organization?
Yeah, and I would just add, you can think of it two ways, right? You can think of it BC, which would be before COVID, or you can think of it after COVID, right? And who doesn't right now feel like they're living in a big old COVID petri dish, right? So whichever it is, whether it's something that's been more, that goes back a bit further in your organization around change and the speed of change, or something more recent, the thought being that if you have a couple things in mind that are impacting you, as Candace and I go through our presentation, it might be a little easier to take some lessons from it. So that's why the question's so early in the presentation.
I know that in my experience in talking to clients, the changes are vast from some clients who have been able to pivot and find opportunities in what they're manufacturing and how they're serving, whereas other organizations, their entire business has dried up overnight. We have my brother's in travel. 760 of his 800 employees laid off instantaneously after 20 years. I think this speed of change is happening faster than anyone could have ever recognized between March and April.
Yeah, and Anissa, thank you for saying that, because I think what you'll find in the presentation today is that the examples that are easy to think of are all current, right? Because so much is happening right now, and we're probably all watching the news to some degree. So we will use many current examples. And as always, when Candace and I do any type of a presentation, either in person or virtually, we bring our favorite quotes to the table with us. So I'm going to let Candace, or actually I'll lead with one of my favorite quotes currently, which is, irrelevance happens when the speed of change outside an organization is greater than the speed of change inside an organization. This actually comes from a TED Talk from Rick Warren, and it's dated. It's a number of years ago, but I found, both Candace and I both found ourselves thinking of this here recently in light of all the things that are going on in the world. And I think in a nutshell, it covers a lot of things, right? It's that organizations are only as relevant as the outside world. And if they're not keeping up with the change that's going on around them, then at some point, for lack of a better word, I would say they become almost irrelevant. And so that's something I always try to keep in mind with regards to the why behind organizations really do need to keep an eye on change and have a strategy with regards to change. And Candace, I'll let you take yours.
Yeah, so my quote is, the illiterate of the 21st century are not those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think this really speaks to the speed of change and learning at the speed of change, because it's not just about the knowledge and having the models and the systems and the theories, but it's about being able to take those, unlearn them, and relearn new things. And it really shows how learning and change are going hand in hand in today's world.
Yeah, Candace, it also makes me think or reflect a bit on, if you think of companies today that were not ahead of the curve with regards to either employees working virtually or some type of an e-learning platform around learning and teaching and communicating, what a disadvantage those companies were at in the light of all that's happening around us right now.
Yeah.
And Candace, I think you're going to tell us a little bit about VUCA, which I think is a very unique concept. I'd not heard much about it before, but I think it describes kind of the world that we're living in right now so very well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the rate of change, just really looking at that first, is just really centered around how fast things are moving in our society today. So technology, for example, Roger, I think you had a really good example about just technology and how that shifted.
Yeah, well, I'm not a young person anymore, but when I even think back 10 to 15 to 20 years, the technology that we were using then, it's almost appalling. It makes me feel very old with regards to how different it is and how much we've advanced with regards to technology. You know, having worked for large global organizations, I can also tell you that organizational changes happen about every 3 years. And that's not going to change, because that, quite frankly, often happens by design. In large organizations where future leaders' careers are being developed, it's really part of the plan, right, to move leaders so that they get those multifaceted experiences across different business lines. And I think 8 years is actually very optimistic to how often the workforce changes. You know, that would assume about a 12% turnover rate. I know there's industries out there that have 25% turnover rate. And if you use that, the workforce would be changing over every 3 to 5 years.
Great. And so what we've realized, because of the speed of change, and really that data was from maybe 2 years ago. And, you know, you could probably argue that now that rate has changed even more. And so where we are is what's known as the VUCA environment. So VUCA is the new norm. And VUCA was formed actually by a military university after the Cold War. And it really happened as a result of understanding that the environment had shifted from knowing the threat and knowing who your threat was to having multiple threats that could come from any place and that would emerge. And it became pretty popular as a business strategy, not fully adopted, but I think now we realize that, you know, our world is pretty volatile. It's uncertain and it's complex and ambiguous. And that it requires a different response, right? It says that there's a constant changing nature. There's a change in speed. There are things that are uncertain. The world is pretty interconnected. So decisions can't be linear anymore. And really what we're trying to do is just share some best practices around what organizations can do in their workforce to be able to respond to VUCA environments.
Yeah, I would add to that, you know, just going down, you know, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, you know, how true do all four of those ring right now? Not only in the businesses that we're involved in, but also in our personal lives. You know, when I think of volatility, you know, it's hard not to think of the market. It's hard not to think of how different businesses have been impacted. And it really takes a vision for companies to take aggressive actions when they're not sure what the future holds. But I think we all bear witness that some companies have been better at it than others. When I think of uncertainty, it's hard not to think selfishly about my personal life, how much all of our personal lives have changed. And it's just very, you know, it's very difficult to understand what's going on around us and really be able to comprehend it. With regards to complexity, the example I would throw out there is think of some of the really, really simple, you didn't even have to think about things in your life and now how they're requiring a bit more focus. I don't know if any of you noticed, but I could use a haircut. But the complexities of trying to get a haircut scheduled right now are something that I'm just not willing to take on. So, and that goes to, you know, taking takeout orders. It goes to, you know, very, very simple things in our lives. And then the ambiguity is kind of a tough one because in times of ambiguity, we tend to retreat sometimes. But I think what we're finding is that we really need to step up and still make decisions, still take risks, and try to innovate, even though the ambiguity makes it very, very difficult to do so. You know, if you listen, as I've tried to do for the past 30 years, being parts of large companies, there's a general thread that I've picked up on, which is along the lines of in a healthy economy, many leaders can deliver positive results, but in times like these, very few can. I worked for a leader for our North American business for about 10 years, and a quote that he used probably 10 years ago that I hadn't thought a lot about until recently has come back to front of mind. He used to say, "I don't need leaders who tell me what the weather is. I need leaders who can change the weather." And I think that's truly something that, you know, hopefully rings true with all businesses today. The same old is not a viable strategy anymore. Very few companies have the luxury of being able to say, just keep doing what we've been doing. And so I think that's why that quote came back to front of mind for me.
Yeah, that's something to think about, Roger. Great quote.
So we tried to show through kind of like the, you know, the Olympic rings, what learning organizations look like. And, you know, the absorptive capacity piece is the ability to look at what's going on in the environment and around you and take it in. You know, sometimes I think of it as being able to look at the data, right? And being able to see the trends and hopefully be able to predict the future a bit. Some organizations are definitely better than others with regards to that. Same holds true with the experimentation capacity. You know, it sounds easy to say organizations need to experiment more. The hard part is that when you say that, the risk equation for organization goes way up. And I think we all basically understand that part of the learning process is failing. And oftentimes organizations don't want to fail at any level. So it makes it difficult for leaders within that organization to truly learn the lessons they need to learn. And then the adaptive piece is how do you adapt and react to what's going on around you? You know, about 5 years ago, Candace and I were working on a project for a large company where the senior leaders told us it was building an online learning university for about 1,700 field technicians. And many of those senior leaders told us that those technicians were a little bit older, that they didn't have smart devices, that they would never be open to online learning, and we were wasting our time. Well, 6 months after we rolled out the e-learning platform, 80% of the technicians were using it. And I think I tell you that story just to kind of help you guard against self-biases that we all have with regards to thinking about how we need to adapt. Just because you may not be a fan of online learning does not mean that the rest of the world agrees with you. And I think the bottom line around how people learn is people like to learn the way they're accustomed to learning. So there's a segment of the population that likes to learn through classroom training, but there's also probably a segment that's 35 and younger that is very, very accustomed to learning through online learning as well. Anything to add to that, Candace?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's just really looking at learning from all different aspects, right? It's how you look at learning, how you absorb learning externally, just being able to respond to change by adapting and sustaining an experimentation sort of culture within your organization.
Great, thank you. Thank you. And then on this slide, the 4 areas to increase the speed of change. I'll try to explain each of them to you from our eyes at least. Emphasis on the big picture. You know, as I've listened to the news and some of the positive things that are going on out there, I'm amazed at how companies have looked at themselves differently through the big picture and are continuing to maybe not thrive and certainly not making the profit that they would like as a business, but continuing to get it. There's many stories out there, I'm sure most of you have seen, about restaurants who, rather than concentrating on the profitability, have looked at the bigger picture of how do we keep feeding people? And they've worked through charities and donations to continue to feed the community in a time when really profitability goes out the window from their standpoint. So a big kudos to companies that are looking at the world differently and just not concentrating on the profitability of the business. With regards to the leadership competencies, you know, I think organizations have to, if they aren't already, find a way to encourage, you know, kind of like innovation and risk, as we talked about before, within their leader populations. Get people out of their comfort zones. Another one of my favorite quotes is, "A comfort zone is a beautiful place, but nothing ever grows there." And that's from Sir Richard Branson. With regards to employee competency development, if we want employees to thrive in times like we're in right now, I think we could look at the VUCA model and say things like vision, understanding, clarity, and agility are all very important competencies to teach our employees. so that they'll be prepared or better prepared for situations like this as they come up again. And then the technology that enables learning, back to a comment about don't get stuck on one type of training, right? Think about all the different ways organizations can train their employees. And I think we're coming to understand that online learning is certainly one of many ways to train. And I think given what's happened, many people have become a bit more comfortable with online learning because it's a viable alternative given our current situation.
Yeah. And I would just add that really when we looked at these 4 areas, we felt that it really just is about how do you get your organization to a place where they can move fluidly through change. And so that's what this represents. And just going, driving in on that first point of an emphasis on the big picture, it's become very apparent that organizations that lead with a clear purpose and leave room for flexibility on how they implement. So they understand their why, but the what and the how is where they're able to be a little more flexible. We've seen that they're able to pivot, as Anissa has been using that word, and she's shared on a talk that she's recently done, how they've been able to pivot based on their purpose and having a clear vision of that. So Airbnb, for example, launched a global initiative to help over 100,000 healthcare workers and first responders around the world by giving them housing. So that doesn't necessarily help with their profitability, as Roger mentioned, but it certainly helps with their brand and organizations and customers rather being able to identify positively with their brand. And we know that they're doing that to help because they're solving a problem. Signature Brew is another company that we've read about that is doing something creative, right? So they're taking a problem of musicians that have worked for them or could work for them in terms of entertainment at the pub, and they're using them to hand deliver what they call a pub in the box. That includes glassware, snacks, music, and playlists and quizzes. So they're delivering their experience, which is, their overall purpose, and providing it in a way that still brings them revenue and also helps with one of their employee bases, which is the musicians. And then there's Spiffy, which is a car cleaning service that pivoted a little and opened up an offering to clean facilities and healthcare facilities. So they went from car cleaning to being able to open up and do that with facilities that needed cleaning. So it's just an example of how focusing on that sort of higher purpose and moving towards that and being flexible on the what is really important in a VUCA environment.
Hey, Candace, these are all great examples of companies that have pivoted. I want to give credit to an organization out there that I don't think I would describe it as pivoting, but they were excellent at kind of seeing the future and making the decisions that enabled them to be prepared for this. And that's Emory University out of Atlanta. There's a number of stories that have been done on them that I would encourage you to look at. They saw that there was the potential for a pandemic, and they took some risks with regards to monies that they spent in budgets to prepare for it. And even when they got up against not being able to get some of the essential equipment they needed, rather than give up, they went to their engineering department, and the engineering department helped them create what they needed around the equipment that was necessary. So, there's more than one way, right, to beat it, so to speak. One way is to pivot, but, there are organizations like Emory University out there that were extremely good at seeing ahead and building something that would be prepared for these pandemic times that we're in.
Yeah, that's a great example. I think that goes back to the previous slide we were on with just the absorption, capabilities and being able to see what's happening externally and then, work and adapt, which they were able to do that. And then using their engineering team for a different purpose. So experimentation. So all of those are wrapped in that example. So thanks for sharing.
Exactly.
And so when we think about leadership competencies, which is the second piece of the four topics that we're talking about, it's really, what do leaders need today to function effectively in a VUCA environment? And resilience is one that I think we've all seen, and it's been going around, and it's personal resilience is so important. And I describe it as the ability to sort of press forward, move forward, identify what the company still has, learn what's needed, and move forward. And I think, Roger, you have a pretty good example of how you describe resilience, but just being able to build resilience. And I think what's also important is understanding that people have experiences outside of just textbook knowledge, but their personal experiences really help with building resilience. And that's where the second piece comes in. We understand how important inclusion and diversity is, but I think just really putting an emphasis on inclusion and empowering differences. So having that psychological safety within the organization and being a leader that empowers differences amongst your team so that people know, your differences are what matters in a complex, uncertain environment where we have to be able to look at and see things from all sorts of perspectives. Inclusion is what's really going to help with that. The other competency is just being able to mobilize and inspire. And, you think about how the last 2 to 3 months occurred. There's a lot of people who are dealing with anxiety. Uncertainty brings out a lot of feelings in individuals. So a leader who's able to mobilize people around a common and clear mission and also inspire them around that goal with the sense of sort of we're all in this together really matters. And then just last part is just a growth mindset. Finding leaders who are always learning. I think that the TED Talk that we mentioned with Rick Warren says that, if you stop learning, then you're not leading, right? You stop learning, you stop leading. It's as simple as that. So just continuous learning, continuous experimentation, and being open to that. Roger, do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I'll kind of bookend it a little bit, right? With regards to personal resilience, I mean, I think of all the learning leaders in businesses today that, this is a very tough time to stand tall. And what I mean by that is to kind of stick to your guns with regards to, do we need as much learning as we thought we did? Do we need to, improve our online learning? I think we all know that when the budget gets shrunk, learning and development is often at the front line, so to speak. And so I would encourage learning and development leaders to really stand tall. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying go in unprepared, right? But go in prepared, be able to articulate why learning is more important now than ever. And don't necessarily just take one for the team, right? When it comes to budget. At least show your leadership ability by demonstrating that you believe in what it is you're doing and the role that it plays in our current times. And then when I think of the growth mindset, we kind of touched on it before, but profit is something that's going to change for most companies through this time, but there's other types of profit as well. And the companies that may be laying off employees like Airbnb, but at the same time, really capitalizing on their brand, their employer brand with regards to housing healthcare workers. It's not a, profit is everything kind of game right now. It's what organizations are going to look like coming out the other side. And if profit isn't sustainable, are there other gains that organizations can make to make them more viable in the new world?
Great.
And then really, actually, Candace, I'm going to let you take this one.
Okay, sure. So just looking at employees, right, and what competencies are important in a VUCA environment for employees. Obviously, there are changes that will occur. We don't know how jobs will look 5 years, 10 years from now. Roger and I were talking before this, and he mentioned that, you know, if you look and think about 20 years, 30 years ago, there were jobs that you could do that really for the next 20 years, nothing would really change about that job. And that is just so far from the reality of today. So while we can't really prepare our workforce for specific skills as we're thinking about a changing environment, there are things that all organizations can do to equip their workforce to ensure that they're change agents. Because the more that individuals are equipped to handle change, and deal with change and actually be change agents, the better off a company will be. You don't want to think about adding, you know, specific skill sets and then also help having to move people along the change process. So one of the competencies that we recommend is design thinking. Design thinking is a process that really helps with understanding the end user, understanding the needs, and then also going through an ideation process where you're challenging assumptions, you're looking at different ways of doing things, you're collaborating, getting other perspectives, and then it's a test environment because you have a prototype and then you have testing. So it's perfect in a VUCA environment. The other competencies and skills that we recommend is just project management and change management. It doesn't need to be in-depth project management training, but just an understanding of how to run a project, how change occurs, understanding codependencies and how things are interconnected and risk. All of those are really important facets, especially in VUCA environments and just systems thinking. And then lastly, collaboration, being able to collaborate across departments, across differences, and just really facilitating that as a learning experience within your organization. Anything
Candace, I would just add, you know, I've done quite a bit of executive coaching throughout my career. And I talk to up and coming leaders about, if you want to stall your career, a really good way to do it is to be antagonistic or adversarial when it comes to change within an organization. I remind them that regardless of what their personal thoughts are with regards to change, that to be a credible leader and one that is both appreciated by the employees as well as the organization, they need to be an advocate of change and they need to be a proponent of change. And you know, just keep that front of mind for those of you that are in leadership roles, that in today's world, to think that you can resist change and just ignore it, I think would be a grave mistake.
That's great, thank you.
We'll move on to kind of one of our closings, and it's around, you know, the technology that enables peace. I started today's meeting talking a little bit about 30 years of experience and some lessons I've learned. Early in my career, I was an advocate of proprietary learning management systems, you know, closed loop, if you want to think about them. They own the language. You can't really customize them however you want to articulate it. But through my career, I've become more and more a proponent of open source learning platforms. And the reason for that is a closed source proprietary system may meet your needs at the time of purchase, but as your organization changes, as the environment changes, proprietary systems just aren't built in a way that are meant to change and be, you know, kind of updated or specific to certain situations. You know, they're clunky. It takes longer for them to change. Whereas I think open source platforms are definitely built in a way that, you can kind of add different features. You can customize it based upon the need from both the learners as well as the environment, and they're much easier to work with. The other thing I encourage companies to pay attention to, and this is a really big one, although it's only 3 letters there as a bullet point, it's the learner's experience. If there's one thing that I think Candace and I both learned, it's around designing an e-learning solution that does not keep the end user's front of mind is another tragic mistake, because they just won't use it. Yeah, I mean, we can all identify with that, right? We go to do something online, 10 minutes later, we're still looking for what we came to find. And 8 times out of 10, you'll just give up, right? And forget about it. And the employees, the end users are very much that same way. So I was always, in the last couple of roles I had, I put together basically learner forums and learner committees where we would, on a regular basis, kind of check what we were doing to make sure that we were on target. And I have to share the story that the number one feedback that I got, regardless of the user group, when we were designing platforms for learning, was around the idea of, whatever you do, please do not waste my time. And I just wanted, maybe try to drive that point home with everybody on this call that probably has one role or another within learning or development or as a leader, to please keep in mind, make it a pleasant experience, make it a rewarding experience, make it helpful in a way that users will want to come back to, and please don't waste their time. Please don't waste our time, right? I think we can all identify with that.
Yeah, I think those are great points, Roger. I would just add, to what I'm hearing you say, especially, is when it comes to like online learning, it's not just about having it online. It's about making sure that it's effective and drives impact. And specifically around an LXP, what I like most is that it blends the informal and the formal learning, together. And it sort of works like what we're used to, which is like a Netflix of learning. It tracks by, role or competencies and shares potential learnings, and then also has that social component where employees can actually bring their learning to the platform. So it's really just, in all that we talked about today, how do you look at those areas and determine how to remove the barriers, how to ensure that we can move faster in terms of learning. So it's making sure that you're getting information from all sources, not just one source, and being able to get that in front of your employees right away. So just in closing out, really organizations are moving and the world is moving rather at a rapid speed of change. And we just have to continue to make sure as business leaders and learning development professionals that our learning practices are meeting those demands of a constantly changing world. So thank you.
Thank you. You guys, this was great. I have a few questions if we still have a few minutes.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that really made a lot of sense, right, is that we do have to learn faster and we still have learning needs. But because organizations are in the middle of driving change, sometimes it's very difficult to maneuver quickly in and provide learning solutions, right? And so my real question is about, how do you recommend organizations create some micro learning experiences, some just in time, just enough learning to where it really integrates with the speed at which we're having to move right now, to pivot, to change, to reposition, all of the above deal with life. What's a solution there for an organization around the micro learning, making the learning fit with where we are?
Yeah. That's a great question. And to answer it briefly, I think we need to do all those things, right? We have to get it to them just in time. We have to make it fit. They don't want to take a 6-hour course. They want to solve a problem they have in the real world that is maybe a 5-minute explanation, right? Or maybe I describe it another way, a segment of a course, a much, much bigger course overall, right? So I think there's an artificial intelligence component of this, is that if we can continue to use artificial intelligence to help predict what they may need and what they're looking at and sharing with others, that's extremely important. I think keeping that end user in mind that we spoke about at the end and understanding what they need is very important. I mean, when we were building our last learning platform, we found out a lot of technicians, if they couldn't find it through the company, were going to YouTube. I mean, imagine a technician up on a rooftop fixing an air conditioning unit who doesn't know how to solve a problem, can't find it on the company portal, and is using YouTube. And not that there's any, believe me, YouTube has saved many a technician. I'm quite confident of that. But I think the bigger question is, how do you take that content, the good content, because it's not all good or relevant on YouTube, just like anywhere else. How do you get that good content onto your platform is really, a big part of the answer to your question, Anissa.
Yeah. And I would just say, and that's why I'm a huge proponent of the LXP, Anissa, because it has that component where learning is happening in all sorts of ways. It's not just through a course, it's conversations, it's lessons learned. Hey, I tried this over here, it didn't work. Or this department is doing this and it's working great. How can we get that into a bite-sized sort of course or information to communicate that out? And that's where sort of a platform that has that component where you're able to have employees and others put information into the system and get that out on a shared resource, or just constant reflection, right? That's a big part of learning and being able to disseminate that information out within organizations as they're learning, right?
So the ability to share knowledge as part of the learning. I think a lot of times organizations, there's this dichotomy. We've got our internal learning mechanisms where Joe, who's been in the shop for 20 years, all you got to do is go down there and have a conversation with Joe. But what happens when Joe no longer wants to talk to us or it's time for Joe, he's getting his retirement cake, right? So what you're saying is that a platform and a methodology to deliver micro learning with just in time targeted learning experiences, but also that can capture the organizational knowledge capture is essential.
Absolutely.
And they don't have to be separate.
They should not, right? Because if we're talking about being able to increase learning, it's just what you said, right? We have all of these sort of things that are hindrances to getting that information out. The question is, what can we do to, even that platform and not just get learning to people when they need it, as they need it, from all forms, informally and formally.
And Anissa, another really good example of that is we've done some work, or we're doing some work with Delta Airlines, where different pieces of equipment on an airplane will have essentially sensors, right? So if the technician is working on, a particular part of the engine, if they go to their smart device, it knows that where that technician is and will only provide the learning associated in the area that they're working on, which I think is pretty cool as well.
Okay, that's very cool. One of that leads me to another piece. Right now, a leadership development program might not be the right thing to introduce, right? Right now, a high potential, how to manage your career within our organization, not quite what folks are going to be looking for. But it could be of benefit if for example, I was reading a study, and forgive me, I don't remember what it was, but it's, the COVID impact on HR, and the surveys that are coming back in for the HR folks who are doing the surveys is that employees do not feel supported enough by their managers and by their companies, even though their companies are doing the checklist. We're communicating every day, or those that are, right? We are sending out emails about what's going on. We are keeping our folks informed. We are offering the PEO number where they can get some help on some of the mental issues. There's still a disconnect. What could someone do in HR? I'm thinking in terms of twofold, right? Supporting the managers and understanding how they play into this communication gap, and how they play into restoring confidence and faith with their direct reports. And I'm going to pause right there. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind. I get where you're coming from with regards to maybe not the best time for leader development, but I also think we've learned some things here recently that could be extremely impactful to learner development. So my mind goes to, a virtual workforce. Managers and leaders that have been dragging their heels for the past 10 years with regards to that probably got beat up or at the very least was a little painful, let's say, right? So what better time to deliver some learnings with regards to how to manage a virtual workforce, right? And alleviate some of those headaches. And so I think that's a possibility as well. The other part about what you said that I've seen this happen so often, if once normalcy, when we go back to normal, whatever that looks like in the future, if employees pick up that there's money not being spent on things that were important to them, I'm afraid that sends a message that you may not want to send as an organization. So I'm with you that programs may need to change, but I'd think long and hard about eliminating or deferring programs that people within the organization feel that are necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I would definitely say it's about understanding the true need right now. And maybe it's not wrapped up in, a robust leadership development program, but it certainly has something to do with it and ensuring that they're equipped in the moment and to thrive beyond it.
Well, and this is our thing. We love it. We're passionate about it. We have spent a lot of time looking at the ROI and building a business case around the benefits of in retention, in performance and productivity and business development around it. But how does an HR person make the case for it when you've got your entire executive team looking at, okay, we don't have a choice. We've got to cut 50% of our expenses today. And we're not going to cut, if they're smart, right? They're not going to cut their business development expenses. They're going to be careful about what kind of marketing expenses they cut. So how do you make a business case in the middle of that?
I think it's a great time to make a case. And I say that because I feel as though online e-learning specifically has been undervalued in many organizations. So, and it's not even about keeping your entire budget. There'll be very few departments that will be able to do that, right? Realistically. But I think it's about assessing the needs of the organization and building online materials that will help with that. And maybe it's even around the business development piece, or how do we come back from this, right? That would educate a wide swath of the employees within the organization. Whatever the needs of an organization are going forward, I strongly believe online learning is a piece of that. It may not be the only channel that you want to utilize, but it's one of the channels when it comes to communicating and teaching and learning and employees learning from. So I personally, I'd welcome any calls or reaching out via LinkedIn or anything from learning and development leaders that are going through that, because I have some pretty strong feelings and I would love to help them, right? Because I think the timing is actually not bad right now to make a case, because everybody's making a case right now.
Yeah. And I would just say, to Roger's point earlier, back to that personal resilience piece and how it's important to stand, right, in what you believe. I think all learning and development professionals, HR, we understand the importance of workforce development. And Anissa, you made a point. You said, companies are probably smart not to get rid of their business development. But I think in today's time, we have to understand that workforce development is just as important as business development, because we're in a season where nobody understands what to do. So if you have people that you're keeping on your team and keeping in your company, they have their hands up. They're not sure what to do. So you have to give them that information to enable them to move forward to win. So I think it's just as important.
That's really valuable. We have a really large client who had pushed pause on all learning and development. And we got a call. Gosh, time is passing so quickly. I think it was Monday, but it feels like it was, yesterday.
It all runs together, right?
So it was Monday. And what's come up is significant discord, so much conflict. And naturally, we know, we're all under so much stress that conflict is just bubbling to the surface. What we used to be able to maneuver around, we no longer have the bank account to draw from. How are people learning about conflict and conflict management and more effective conflict and more effective communication, shifting from an on-site in-person training to an e-learning portal? How do they get the practice they need around conflict resolution, for example?
I think you may have uncovered a whole new training class that could be developed. Quite honestly, I'm not kidding. Leaders, as an example, that are used to the face-to-face communication most of them will struggle, right? Because it's two different types of media, interpretations. You don't have the nonverbal gestures. It's harder to use a sense of humor, all that when you're doing it either online or, via email or something like that. So different skill sets. And if people don't have them, I think organizations will struggle in those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's I always say yes and approach, right? So it's what can you learn and gather, with a blended sort of model, if it's like that conflict course that you're talking about, and then what can they do? Like we're virtual, so we definitely have no choice. So if there's conflict, either there's the ability through a lot of especially the open source learning platforms to stream live webinars, a lot virtual led courses, and then also have like some pre-work through quizzes and online modules to just build up the context and the basis moving into that course. So I think companies can get really creative right now on how do you use virtual learning and online learning. And, at some point when we get back to, in person, how do you blend, those models together to get the best experience? Because, just as Roger mentioned earlier, you have employees who go on YouTube to find content, and you want to make sure that whatever they're looking at is as accurate as it can be, and it's curated and vetted through your organization as much as possible.
Such a true statement. My son just graduated from college in December. It was pretty much a YouTube education from a top 5 university. Every time I asked him if he was studying, he'd be like, "Yeah, I'm on YouTube." I'm like, yeah, it's better than my professor. Oh, it's all right. He still has the degree.
Yeah.
A new use for YouTube. I like it. Yeah.
That's right. So, wow, this is really giving me a lot to think about. And I think for our audience as well. Share with us how folks can get a hold of you and why they might reach out to you. And I know that you guys had come up with a couple of really cool specials. So I'd love to have you share that with our folks.
So first of all, you can find us on LinkedIn, of course. I am And I know Roger is always happy to connect, and especially now I'm doing virtual coffees, and just connection is important. I'm an extrovert. I like to talk to people. So reach out. You can also email us at Candice.McGlenn@innovationsolutions.com. And then Roger is roger.rinker@innovationsolutions.com. Reach out to us if you have any questions about just e-learning, online learning, training and development. We're here to support. And we are giving away an exclusive offer to the Turnkey audience of a 50% off of our e-learning strategy audit, where we'll just take a look at what you're doing and offer recommendations, highlighting the strengths of your program and offering recommendations for improvement. I think now more than ever, it's a good time to do that.
Love it.
And Roger, did you have anything to add?
No, I don't think so. You know, I just want to make sure that I think Candice and I would both say we're not saying more online learning is better. It's not the typical more is more, right? It's the online learning is important, but the quality of what you put out there is every bit as impactful as the quantity, if not more so. So that's why we both truly believe it needs to be a strategy versus just a checkbox on a to-do list, right? So I think that's where we can add some value to organizations. And Anissa, we're so thankful for the time you provided us. I can't believe it's been an hour. It seems like it was 10 minutes we started. So, it's been great. Thank you. You're a great MC.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. The replay will be up here shortly. And come back to the platform where you can always come back and listen to the Candice and Rogers replay, as well as download their great PDF of their presentation and sign up for other talks. So we appreciate you guys. Thank you so much, Roger, Candice.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe and healthy.
Great day, everybody. Thank you for joining.
Bye, everyone.